The day before my bar mitzvah, I was sitting in my rabbi's office, and I started to cry. And it's not because I was just afraid of the big day. It's not because I didn't know which girl I was going to ask for the first dance at my disco-themed bar mitzvah party the next night, which was awesome. It's because I had a secret. And to help you understand a little bit about what that felt like, think about the person you're sitting next to, either your right or left. Really look at them. And imagine asking them, are you male or female? You might not need to ask that. Imagine asking, where are you from? You know, what's your nationality? What's your background? Now ask that person, do you believe in God? That's probably going to be a little harder for you, right? And even as I am talking about it here, I'm afraid to talk to you about this because I'm an atheist. And as I say that to you, you form probably some assumptions about what that means, but think about what I just told you. I told you what I don't believe in, not anything about what I do believe in or what I do care about. And that's a problem with the word atheism. But it's a bigger problem than just the GSB or me feeling awkward in front of you guys. In the US, there are 7 states where atheists are barred from holding a public office by constitutional law. In Arkansas, atheists are barred from being a witness to a trial. Those are old laws and impossible to enforce, I hope. But the court of public opinion is no better, unfortunately. About half of Americans say they would never vote for an atheist for public office, regardless of how well qualified they were. What that means to me is like half of you guys wouldn't vote for me because of my religious preference or non-religious preference. But that's prejudice, right? And this climate, it makes non-religious people in the US feel less American or un-American. But 15% of Americans are non-religious. And that's not even including the people who define themselves as religious, but also say they don't believe in God. That's like 45 million people. In fact, the fastest growing religious preference in the US is non-religious. It's the only one that's grown in all 50 states in the past generation. And while prejudice is bad, whether it's against a big group or a small group, this is my story. And religious prejudice is like a much bigger issue than I can tackle, but I can talk to you about atheism because it's what I've known. So this happens because of a mistrust. And I'm willing to bet that those of you who are in the room who are non-religious have felt that mistrust in some point in your life. It's natural to assume, if you derive your morals from God or from Scripture, that atheists have no morals. But this is not true. So it's a big problem. And to help propose like a solution, I want to take you back to my rabbi's office. So there I am, sitting across from him. And as I'm reading the Torah, it's the scroll. I'm reading Hebrew, which I knew for like a month and then forgot. And I start to cry. And I say, I can't do this. I'm about to read this in front of my family and my friends, and I don't believe it. I don't believe in God. And he leans back. He strokes his beard. And he asked me 2 questions. He said, first, what did you learn from your Torah portion, which was the story of Abraham and Isaac? And then he asked me, if in 10 years you're driving on Lakeshore Drive and you see a member of your Hebrew school class on the side of the road with a flat tire, what will you do? And I said, oh, I'd stop and change their tire. What he didn't know is I had just learned to change a tire, which to me was like so exciting and like really my passage into manhood, like forget the bar mitzvah stuff. And so he stood up out of his chair and he reached his hand out and he said, Evan, on behalf of the Jewish community, I welcome you. And that was great, right? It made me feel much better, and I went through with the bar mitzvah. But I want to point out what he did there. He didn't take my lack of belief as an answer in itself. He pushed me. He asked me what I do believe in. And he made sure that the values I held matched up with those of the community that he led. And what it did for me was I realized I can decide this for myself. I need to think about what my beliefs really are. I'm a humanist. A humanist takes a look at the world around and sees that innocent people are sometimes punished. The world is unjust. And therefore, there is no competent moral management, a humanist says. So you look at this sometimes lousy world and think, it's then up to me. I'm the superintendent of my own life. It's up to me to solve human problems, even though I know I can never fully complete that task. What it means to me in short is like, I don't believe in life after death, so I believe that this life is the one that matters. And the reason I say that specifically is there's a misunderstanding about those who don't believe in heaven and hell or a judgment from on high. And I want to read you a quick quote from a pastor who I actually quite respect that represents sort of the other point of view, which is that if your time on earth were all there is to this life, I would suggest you start living it up immediately. You could forget about being good and ethical, and you wouldn't have to worry about any consequences of your actions. You could indulge yourself in total self-centeredness because your actions would have no long-term consequences. To point out what's wrong with that, I'm going to pick on one of you. Gib, do you believe in God?
Yes.
If you decided tomorrow for yourself that God didn't exist and that there was no one judging you, would you go on a spree of raping and pillaging?
Probably not, no.
I thought not, but it's good to confirm. What this misses is that we evolved to help each other. And there's nothing more important to my long-term happiness than the effect I have on the people around me, on you. Unfortunately, I realize that this prejudice comes from a place of just not knowing, right? When we don't know something, we fear it. Fear leads to prejudice. And the non-religious don't do a great job of representing what we stand for, what we believe in, because it's this amorphous group of all kinds of people. I'm just one of them. I don't speak for the group. But I felt this prejudice when I was 10. I went to my friend Andy's house a lot on the weekends to play with Legos. He had this like current day Lego set with a train, and I had the futuristic one with the monorail. And this Saturday, I stayed over, and his family, who are Catholic, took me to church, which is really nice. And then after church, we had waffles. And his mom had never talked to a Jewish person before. So she started asking me questions about my religion, which was really cool. But I had no idea I was speaking behalf on all Jewish people right then. Sorry, guys. She asked me, as we're eating waffles, do you believe in God? And I said, no. And she said, but surely you must believe in some higher power. And I'm like pouring syrup. I'm like, no. And then she said, but Evan, you must have such a big head to not believe that there's someone watching over you, someone guiding you. You must be so arrogant. And that sounds pretty rough, but at the time, I really was totally focused on making sure there was maple syrup in every little square of that Eggo waffle. So I wasn't upset by it, but it still stuck with me. And actually, what I want to show you is what I wish I could have shown her at that time that sort of represents the way I think about the world. There it is. Does anyone know what this photo is? It's really hard to see. A little bit closer. No? That's Earth. That little dot. This is a photo taken by the Voyager spacecraft. As it left our solar system, NASA had it turn around one last time before it was out of range and take this photo. So it's actually the furthest away photo of Earth we have. Earth is the little dot within the circle. It's one pixel, one pale blue pixel. And I look at this, and I think to myself, I try to convince myself that this pale blue dot and all that's around it was created for one of the 10 million or so species of life on that pale blue dot. Or further, that it was created for one ethnic or religious subdivision of that species. And I can't do it. For me, this is another lesson that science, which I believe is the best way we have to understand the world around us, is just lesson after lesson in humility. We do not live in a privileged reference frame. Our preferences don't count. Therefore, you are the custodian of your own life's meaning. So the next time you meet someone who's an atheist, instead of starting from this blank slate upon which you might assume things, start from this. I don't speak for other people, but it's a place to start. And more importantly, when you meet someone whose values differ from yours, ask them about it. Talk about it. Try to bridge that gap and understand each other. I mean, it's so important. Like, my view of the world impacts everything I do every day, but we don't talk about it. So I want to encourage you to think about that person next to you again and actually ask them, what do you believe in? Thanks.